So far on the real Heroes of Telemark, parachuting into Norway to recreate one of the most daring raids of World War II.
What an amazing sight!
60 years ago, 4 Norwegian resistance fighters were sent as an advance party to recce this innocent-looking factory where Hitler was producing heavy water as part of a top-secret project with enormous ramifications.
The Germans were embarked on a race for an atomic bomb.
But the men landed miles off course and faced a marathon 15-day journey in appalling conditions. Last week, we put 4 commandos through a part of that ordeal, hauling the same bulky equipment and living on the same minimal rations as the original team.
Today was by far the most difficult day. It's only today that we've realised exactly how much weight they did have, but it's very, very heavy and very hard going.
But we pushed them even further to see how hard it is to survive in one of Europe's harshest environments.
Rather cold. Don't try this at home.
The aim 60 years ago was to prepare the ground for British commandos who would be flown in by glider to destroy the factory. But when 1 towing plane and 2 gliders crashed, the whole mission had to be abandoned. With no backup in place, the men of Operation Grouse had to go into hiding, while planners in London came up with a new strategy. I wanted to tell this tale on this, the 60th anniversary of the raid here at Vermork, because I believe that what these men achieved epitomises the determination and the knowledge of nature that is the foundation of everything I believe and teach. This is reindeer moss, so called because reindeer use this for food. It even sees them through some of the harshest winter conditions to be experienced in Europe. I'm on the Hardanger Plateau in Norway, where the temperatures could drop to minus 30 degrees Celsius. Through the winter of 1942-43, this was home to 4 men. And reindeer moss is what they had to scavenge for food when their supplies ran out. In 1965, the story of how those men led an assault to destroy a key part of the German nuclear research program was made into a Hollywood movie, The Heroes of Telemark. But for me, the film missed out the most fascinating part of the tale, the incredible survival skills that made it possible for resistance fighters to operate in this incredibly hostile environment and to thwart German efforts to build the first atomic bomb. But in November 1942, the whole mission was close to collapse. The 4 members of the advanced party, codenamed Operation Grouse, were hiding in this hut. They knew they could expect no mercy if they were found. The Germans had already murdered the survivors of the glider crashes in cold blood, and they were taking steps to prevent another attack.
One of the problems was the Germans knew that Vermork was the target. Consequently, the garrison was increased. There were greater attention paid to fences and mines laid and so on.
I then got the message that we would go up in the mountains and stay there and wait. Well, that's easy to sit in London and say go up in the mountains. So we didn't know where to go.
But they had no alternative. Their hideaway was too close to the plant, and the Germans were searching the area.
So we moved away as quickly as we could into Hardangervidda and found another base there, where we felt quite safe.
High on the plateau, we've located the very hut the men retreated to. Successive attempts to send in reinforcements failed due to the appalling winter, so they had to stay here for 3 whole months. But its position was ideal. It was 20 miles deeper into the mountains than their original hiding place, and well beyond the reach of the Germans garrisoned at the heavy water plant. Amazing though it may seem, in February 1943, the fate of the Western world hung on the weather conditions here on Europe's most desolate mountain plateau, and on the ability of 4 men huddled inside this hut to survive them. The men would be here so long that they would actually begin to suffer from the effects of starvation and vitamin deficiency. Their morale would be constantly bombarded by repeated setbacks and crushing boredom. The biggest problem was finding food in this barren landscape, and that's the challenge for our soldiers this week as they put the Arctic survival skills needed up here to the test. First, we've got 2 Royal Marine Mountain leaders, Britain's Arctic warfare specialists. And we've recruited 2 of their Norwegian counterparts. Both grew up on stories about the real heroes of Telemark.
They were strong. They were a strong, well-motivated bunch of men, which is why they were selected by SOE in the first place. They had the motivation, the spirit, and they were back in their homeland, more importantly, so they had that definite drive and focus in here.
To complete the mission, the British now decided to train up a second group of Norwegians, codenamed Gunnerside. If all went well, they would parachute in on the next full moon. But with each month that went by, the Germans increased their stranglehold on occupied Norway and got that bit closer to producing the heavy water needed to build a bomb. Together with grouse, they would have to find a way into the heavily fortified factory.
We had 3 tasks when we waited for Gunnerside. One was to establish contact with people who could give us some information of the production of heavy water, what the Germans were doing, and so on. The other was to keep up the radio communication with England. And the third was we had the old problem again, to stay alive, to get food.
The most obvious solution was to search other huts, and as the best skier, Klaus Hellberg was sent to scour the area.
At that time, people didn't keep food in their huts because there was a shortage of food all over Norway. And then we had no food at all.
Okay, vi venter. Jeg trenger ekstra.
We tried, of course, to find a reindeer, but at that time, there was no reindeer in the area.
But they had to get strength from somewhere. Reluctantly, they turned to the one staple that kept the reindeer alive through the frozen winter.
So we dug into the snow and found the reindeer moss and ate that.
Reinmåse? Du skal vel ikke ha oss til ete det, vel?
Ja, noe må vi ha fyll i magen med.
If our soldiers want to avoid the same diet, they're going to have to rely on their survival skills. Out here, that's going to be a major task in itself.
Well, you know the score. So you've got 3 days to try and find food. I think it's going to be a real challenge.
Well, on the way in, Ray, we did notice there's quite a few ptarmigan tracks going up into the smaller trees, so that's one option. And we've got the resident fishermen in Preben, so I think that's the other option.
Yeah, the 2.5 kilos they caught fish in this lake back in '63. So
if you catch one like that, that's it. That'll last you 3 days, won't it?
We've not got anything else to do. We've got a fantastic base to work from, so divide up the jobs and get straight out there and get stuck into trying to capture some ptarmigan and fish.
They're starting close to the hut. Preben has decided to fish for trout in the lake beside it. At this time of year, the chances are slim, as the trout are dormant and tend not to bite. Adam and Jason have got a better chance with the ptarmigan, which live right around the world at these northern latitudes. If you watch ptarmigan, you'll see that they like to feed on the buds of birch trees like this. And they tend to make their way across the hillsides in sunshine. So what we do is we present them with a little fence full of the food that they need, the buds like this.
What I'm going to try to do here is set a ptarmigan snare. I've selected my area. There's some tracks running across, traversing across this hillside here.
To make the snare, I've taken this forked branch like this, and at the ends I'm going to break the sapling like that, not so it snaps off, just so it's a green stick fracture. And this, when I push it into the snow, will set and anchor in place. Now, in true survival fashion, we've been rummaging around in the soldiers' rucksacks to see what we could find to make a snare from. What we've come up with is this, which is, believe it or not, the guidance cable for a guided missile. I've never used that before.
Can't see the exit.
So I've secured my snare off using this bit of wire, tied it off to a reasonably strong branch. You see the snare there against my hand.
Fence further on, and so on.
And the thing with the snares is you want to check them on a fairly regular basis, so either at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day. And importantly, remember where you've put them, because if you look at the landscape behind me, you'll stick them anywhere and you'll soon forget exactly where you've put them.
Okay, Preben, tell us how the fishing went today.
Fishing was not very productive today. We made a lot of holes at the ice in different areas, tried to find where the trout is supposed to gather, but either we didn't find the right spot, there's not a lot of trout, or it's probably too early at the year, so it's too dark yet. So tomorrow we try another lake with a different kind of fish in, which is supposed to eat more at this time of year.
The one thing our team doesn't have to contend with is bad weather. 60 years ago, the winter was one of the worst on record. By contrast, we couldn't be luckier. Well, we're blessed with another beautiful morning. About to go searching for our grouse team. I thought you might like, though, to see the sort of logistical support it takes to keep a film crew on the road in these conditions. It's a lot more than grouse ever had. We're very lucky. We've got the Norwegian Army providing this support, and here you can see their bandwagons, their BVs, which can go more or less anywhere. And in there we've got fuel, food, generators, the whole works. Over here, this is their ski pit, to keep their skis safe from bad weather, so they don't blow away or get broken in storms. And they're sleeping in this 8-man tent, which is actually more cosy than the cabin. And that's because, you see that canister there, that's diesel fuel that feeds into a stove that keeps this warm all through the night. This is the inside of the tent. It's really hot in here. This sleeps 8 to 10 people, and they lie with their feet all pointing towards this, the stove, on which you can cook and heat the tent. Organisation is always the key in these situations. On the left-hand side of the tent there's garbage, and that's where fuel feeds in. On the right-hand side is the clean side for food and water. And as always, down here there's a cold well. After 6 days on the plateau, Jason and Adam are reduced to scouring the area for edible vegetation. By December 1942, the original grouse team had been on the ground for 6 weeks, and their meagre diet had left them with all the symptoms of severe vitamin deficiency.
We had so much water in our bodies, and I can tell you that my neck was so thick that I could not get this through, so we understood that we needed vitamins.
The winter vegetation of the plateau would keep them alive for only so long. They also needed a reliable source of protein. Interestingly, they never even tried fishing, and Preben and Thomas are about to find out why. Through trial and error, their search for a suitable lake will take them on a round trip of over 20 kilometers. The further they go, the more energy they use, and the more fish they'll have to catch to make the whole trip worthwhile. To the unprepared, this place would be a death trap. But if you're comfortable in this sort of environment, it's the most amazing place to test your skills. What we got here, see where that's sheared? That broke off, I didn't saw it there. That's broken off there because we've got two different layers of snow. Quite interesting to see that. Yeah? Two different layers of snow and one slid right off of the other. That's exactly why avalanches happen. When the snow gets disturbed, it slides off. This snow hole is hard work, taking most of the day to dig out. It takes really severe conditions to create drifts this deep. But if the weather turns against you, this shelter is stronger than a tent. I dug it into about 1.5 meters depth, and now I can start to make the sleeping platforms, which are raised so that there'll be a cold well for the cold air to sink away from where we're sleeping. Once you've filled in all the gaps in the roof, you need to make sure you can still get fresh air. First, a ventilation hole. Then, an early warning system. If the candle goes out, it's because it can't get enough oxygen. Without the candle, it might be you that sputters and dies. Meanwhile, Preben's luck is about to change.
Kom igen! Kom igen! Yeah!
Og 4 kilometer fra hytta.
I love you, baby. I feel a bit sorry for you as well, though, but on the other hand...
You don't.
You're starving. So I hope you can have like 15 more of you. That would be nice.
Success, but they've covered 22 kilometers each. This is all they have to show for it, and the trout will have to be split 4 ways. Clearly, it's not a worthwhile return for the energy needed to catch it.
There you go. Good enough.
Luckily, the crew and I are living by different rules. Just as well, as each evening there are 8 hungry mouths to feed, and no one feels like catching and cooking their own meal. These are the rations we've been living on. These are Norwegian army rations. They're split into 3 sections, breakfast, lunch and dinner. And all you have to do is add hot water. It's excellent. So when you go out for the day, you just take that and a thermos of hot water. A day's rations provides about 5,000 calories, which sounds a lot, but you burn up far more than usual just staying warm in this environment. 5 kilometers away, our grouse team is sharing a single trout. Just 300 calories, split 4 ways. It's their only meal of the day, so every morsel counts.
We are standing out on the ice and freezing, and use a lot of energy to make this hole. And if we get some fish, the fish are slim, so it's not really good for a body.
So you think we should forget the fishing?
I think we should do that. Okay. And try other things.
Next morning, and the lack of food is starting to get to the grouse team.
Oh, we've got reindeer moss this morning.
Oh, I love it.
Do you?
Yes.
Is it nice?
This is this reindeer moss is also a great tradition in Norway.
Not another one.
Remind me never to go to Bogdays.
Every summer,
the most depressing
every
place
summer
in the
we
world.
eat a lot of reindeer moss.
Reindeer moss and rocks.
We have a reindeer moss festival.
This is reindeer moss the fellas have collected. It's a lichen, and I have to admit it doesn't look very appetizing, but in a survival situation this contains carbohydrate, and if it's a choice between starving to death or eating this, well, the choice is clear. Now, the thing about this moss is it contains a lot of acid, and also holds twigs and grit, and we need to clean the twigs and grit out, and we need to find a way of neutralizing the acid. Now I've got a couple of choices, and if I was stuck here in a survival situation, what I would do is I'd take ash from the fire and I'd boil that down until I get a strong alkali solution, which I can then add to this as I clean it, which helps to neutralize it. But that takes a lot of work, and more importantly, I'd have to destroy the guy's fire here, and I'm sure they wouldn't be too happy about that. Instead, I'm going to use this bicarbonate of soda, which does exactly the same job, and I'm going to sprinkle some of that in there with that and give it a soaking in that liquid there. What I'm going to do now, I'll put this on the stove and boil that for 5–10 minutes in this bicarbonate solution, and then I'll take it off, drain it, put fresh water in and do the same again. Then I'll drain that again and then just cover it with enough water to cover the lichen and give it a long slow simmer until it starts to turn gelatinous, and that'll be it done. This is exactly the process the original team used to make the moss edible, but how well does it work? Alright, well, here we are. Reindeer moss.
Lovely. Get it down.
Yep. That's disgusting.
I know. And it tastes, it's very acidic. It reminds me of seaweed with a lot of grit in it.
What do you think can be done to improve it? It may be disgusting, but there's a purpose to all this, and that's to find out how hard surviving up here would have been back in the war years. For the original grouse team, there was more than their own personal survival at stake. There was the whole operation, which, although they hadn't been told, was to sabotage Hitler's atomic bomb research. During one of the harshest winters on record, they actually were reduced to eating reindeer moss and anything else they could scavenge from the land.
Morning, men.
It's extremely difficult to live off the land up at Svensbu. They're on limited rations, and to do that would have taken an extreme amount of effort. To go out and check the snares every day, to check their fishing lines every day, would have been particularly hard, and it would have had a detrimental effect on you over a period of time. It was a valuable lesson. We learnt it very rapidly, that you need to look on your doorstep as opposed to you know, casting your net too far.
As if to prove the point, on their last evening, Adam and Jason catch a ptarmigan in one of the traps near to the hut.
You happy now?
Oh, yes. Happy with that. It just goes to show, you put the effort in, put enough snares out, eventually it all pays off.
It's not much, but frankly I don't think that they expected to catch anything in 4 days. But even though the original grouse team was to be here for 3 months, our team has given me a real insight into just how hard it must have been for them 60 years ago.
The grouse in the pan there with a small amount of butter and a few spices that we've managed to find in the hut. And that's what's in that pan there.
What I would try to tell my children is not the details, but their spirit to never give up and keep going and complete their missions.
I know myself and Adam were aware of the story, but not of all the sort of individual bits and pieces that went on. To that end, it's been quite amazing to actually discover what they've done. Some of it at first hand, because we've covered some of the ground that they've done.
After 4 days hauling kit across the plateau on minimal rations, all 4 men had lost over 4 kilos in weight. Now, after a further 4 days scavenging for food at Svensbu, there are further surprises in store.
Okay, Jason, you are 73 kilos, so you've lost in total 6 kilos.
It's quite a shock, really. I didn't think I had too much to lose. I'm not saying I wasn't fat, but 6 kilos is quite a lot for somebody of my size.
82 kilos, so you've lost 6 in total.
No, it's normal. And I have still some reserve here.
You are 88 kilos, so you've lost 9 kilos in weight.
That's quite a shocking amount of weight, really, because we've only been out here for 8 days in total. And to lose 9 kilos in 8 days, I think I might sell it to the general public as the Svensbu weight loss programme. So yeah, it's a pretty shocking amount of weight to lose.
What does it tell you?
It tells me that in 8 days I've lost 6 kilos. In a few months, grouse must have been struggling massively to do what they did. And to be honest, there couldn't have been much left of them at the end of this.
During November and December 1942, grouse's ability to survive was quite amazing, but merely staying alive wasn't enough. The sabotage party was expected to join them at the end of December, and they desperately needed a significant source of food to build themselves up for the raid on the heavy water factory. On Christmas Eve, their luck suddenly changed as a herd of migrating reindeer passed close to the hut.
The day before Christmas, when I went out and was able to shoot the first reindeer, it was very, very important. We needed that meat.
Here in the north, every part of the reindeer has its uses. There are sinews for thread, skins for clothing, and of course meat for food. You'd be surprised how much of the carcass can actually be eaten. Huge sack full of food. Today, most people look at an animal like this in terms of steaks and joints, but in a survival situation, nothing can go to waste. There are obvious things in here. We've got the liver, which I'll cut out in a minute and just check and look for any signs of infection, any marbling or any white spots on the liver to see if it's healthy or not. One of the most important parts of the reindeer for the survivors was the contents of here. This is the food sack within the animal, and in here we've got the remains of the reindeer moss that they were eating. They are able to digest reindeer moss where it's difficult for us. And although it's an unappealing source of food, for just about every indigenous population across the northern forests, the northern part of the world, the stomach contents were, at one point in their history, an important source of food. Because in here we gain carbohydrate and we gain vitamins. If I open this up now, it would be pretty disgusting mess inside there, horrible green mess, rather pongy to the nose. But if you let it freeze, which is exactly what the soldiers on this operation did, you can then slice it off and add it to a stew, which adds thickening and brings a vegetable content to the meal, which is really important for nutrition. They knew this because they'd all read books by this man, the Norwegian explorer Helge Ingstad. Like me, he was a firm believer in learning survival skills from indigenous people.
He spent 4 years as a trapper in Canada, living with the Caribou people who lived only on reindeer. And I knew most of what he had written by heart.
They used to mix reindeer moss in between with brain, with blood, etc., etc., to get vitamins. So we tried the same. And it wasn't a dish I would ask to propose. But it's amazing when you are really hungry. You can eat anything. And little by little we thought it was good, actually.
After 8 days on the plateau, we're pulling the team out this evening to this mountain lodge. There's fresh reindeer meat in the pan and a meeting with the original members of Operation Grouse. Only one person is missing, Arne Kjellstrup, who died in 1995. For the survivors, the memories of that winter on the plateau are undimmed after 60 years.
In fact, so after we had shot the first reindeer, and the reindeer stayed in the area, then that was the thing to keep us alive.
Can I ask you all about reindeer moss? What did
we
you
just
think?
tried it a few times, and we didn't prepare it properly. The reindeer moss we used after a while, that was the contents of the stomach of the reindeer.
Yeah.
That we used regularly.
And guess what's cooking in the kitchen? This is exactly how the original team prepared the reindeer stomach contents, cooked in a stew with meat. As yet, our soldiers don't know what's on the menu. If they did, they might not be sitting down so readily.
There are, gentlemen. I did promise you we would show you the proper way to deal with the reindeer moss.
Thank you.
They've gone very quiet.
I was kind of hoping I'd never see it again.
How's that?
Well, it doesn't taste like seaweed anymore, which is the main advantage, I think, to it. It tastes just like a bit like spinach. Yeah, it's quite good.
It's better when the reindeer had chewed it once.
It's been a huge honour for me to share this meal with the old saboteurs and to watch it bring the memories flooding back. It was Christmas Eve 1942, and if all went to plan, 6 fellow Norwegians would parachute in on that night's full moon. Together, they would advance on the factory and carry out a raid so risky that few of them could have expected to escape alive. The men eating with us tonight recreated that evening for a Norwegian film made just 5 years after the war.
It was a Christmas Eve. We had a good meal with reindeer meat. We had a small Christmas tree. And we had music from the radio. Yeah, we had a fine time.
I will be drinking Johnny Walker when I will be drinking Johnny Walker when I come. Singing aye aye yippee, aye aye yippee, aye aye yippee yippee aye.
So for now, grouse had food and could build themselves up for the sabotage operation. Meanwhile, another team of Norwegian soldiers based in Scotland had been busy training for the raid. I'm now following in their footsteps to the highlands around Aviemore. Here, the Special Operations Executive had set up camps to train many specialist commando units to go back to Norway and to fight the Nazis. This is a monument to several hundred Norwegian commandos who were trained here at Aviemore, living in a camp down in the valley below me. They'd all escaped from occupied Norway and were hoping with training and assistance to be able to go back and liberate their country.
These were volunteers. These were people who had made a conscious and physical, they left their homeland in order to continue the fight. So these are people whose conviction was unswerving.
Even now, 60 years on, there are signs everywhere that they were here. This is Drummintool Lodge on the Rothiemurkus estate near Aviemore. This former hunting lodge was commandeered by the Special Operations Executive and used as a base by the Norwegians. One of their most promising recruits was Joachim Ronneberg, and he was asked to head the team to attack the heavy water factory.
The only thing you thought of was to get on a job, to get back to Norway, to do something. And this was a terrific chance.
Ronneberg was instructed to recruit 5 men who would accompany him on the operation.
You looked for a man who was strong and physically fit, a man that you had seen through exercises, being good-humored and taking stress and things with a smile.
The 5 men he chose were all expert skiers and outdoorsmen who, with the right training, would become one of the most highly decorated commando units of the Second World War.
The spirit, the way you built each other up, that was very important. I think that was probably one of the most important things, that you met with people you hadn't known before, and you felt that you had to work as a team, and you built friendships that, well, even today they are very, very strong.
The whole area was off limits to the public. They had mock villages and railway lines set up where they could practice guerrilla tactics and demolition. Today, you can still find evidence of this training.
This is the beach by Loch Morlich, and if you look into the sand here, you'll find that the beach is absolutely littered with shards of broken glass. Now that's not come from the party of a Lagerlaut, that's the remains of one of the hundreds, perhaps thousands of Molotov cocktails that they used in training here.
I've heard that this hut, just a short walk away, contains yet more evidence of the days when they trained here, even though it was abandoned nearly 60 years ago.
This is amazing. This building, I know from talking to the saboteurs that this was their quartermaster store, and it's got all the hallmarks, big wide shelves, an old stove there. Amazing. Cases. Some of them have been used for dividers in the walls here. This one's interesting. It says Quartermaster General, Norwegian Army, Norway House, Dumfries, Scotland. It's incredible. It's almost like they left just yesterday. Unbelievable.
The cairngorms were perfect for training. The terrain was similar to Norway, so the men could keep themselves fit for the mission. They used the rivers and hills to hone their outdoor skills, even if that did mean stealing from the local landowner.
I really admire the spirit and the sense of humour of the commandos. Not only were they shooting the laird's deer, they were also poaching his salmon from Loch Morlich. This is where they did it, where the river flows out of the loch, and I asked them, well, what technique were you using? Were you fly fishing or spinning? And I got shot down. No, we were using hand grenades, of course. What else would they do?
Scotland was like a second home for the men as they waited for their chance to get back to Norway. Besides their military training, Gunnerside would rely on intelligence from this man, Major Leif Tronstad. Before the war, he'd been a scientist who had actually helped to build the factory and knew the layout intimately.
I asked Professor Tronstad when we should be ready to leave, and he said we ought to be ready by the 17th of December. And that meant that we had just over a fortnight to get prepared for a winter expedition to Norway. Then he told me this was very, very important, but he never spoke about nuclear weapons at all. They just mentioned heavy water. But you understood that it had to be very important, and therefore we had no time to lose.
By the end of December, everything was in place. The Gunnerside team had completed its training, and back in Norway, grouse had plenty of reindeer to feed on. The biggest problem was the weather. That winter was one of the worst on record. Gunnerside would have to parachute in at night so the Germans wouldn't spot them. But back then, aircraft had no electronic navigation. They relied on moonlight and clear visibility to recognize the drop zone.
Due to weather conditions, we never came away from Britain on the December moon.
It was another month before a second attempt could be made. They flew east, but again the conditions were against them.
Flying through the night in the middle of winter, the problems of icing, and then trying to find the recognition signal from the ground. Do you make the decision? Do you drop them blind? Do you drop them not to the reception committee? And therefore the decision was taken that although you've gone to incredible risks to get out there, you've got to turn around and come back again and try it again the next night.
Every time when you had flown over Norway, you were hoping, and you were equally disappointed when we went westwards because we hadn't been able to find a dropping place.
So the January full moon passed without a successful drop. For the members of Grouse, the struggle for survival continued through the most appalling winter conditions.
At that time of the year, it's very, very little daylight at all. So we went to bed very early because we had no light.
Each night, they would keep boredom at bay by taking it in turns to entertain each other with subjects close to their hearts.
I remember I had talks about how to find your way in the mountains, about the names. You could see from a peak that the peak had such and such name.
Kjellstrup could talk about, he was a plumber, so maybe he talked about plumbing.
Just waiting for some hot water for a nice drink of hot water.
Yeah.
Lovely.
I tried to keep the friendship, and we did. We had no troubles, actually.
Throughout their long wait, they were in daily contact with the SOE headquarters in London. As the February full moon approached, they waited anxiously to see whether Gunnerside would attempt their drop.
The SOE had given me 2 numbers. There was 1 number sent every day, and I think it was 211. And that number meant no operation tonight. But then came another number, and that was operation tonight. And that was very exciting.
With conditions on their side, the men of Operation Gunnerside decided they would jump over the plateau, whether they found the flares on the ground or not.
We had been asking Royal Air Force just to drop us on Hardangervidda, and then we would find our way map reading down on the ground ourselves. And that was what I did. But what I didn't know was that they didn't drop us on the place where we had agreed to. So that gave us some trouble.
This is where they landed, at Lake Skrikken, a full 20 kilometers from where the grouse team were waiting at Svensbu and getting increasingly worried.
Twice we were out looking for them with our lights, but they didn't find us.
Gunnerside were pinned down by a blizzard for 4 days, but when the weather broke, they could finally set off for their rendezvous.
We came down the hillside when we suddenly saw 2 shears out, apparently looking for somebody. And I remember Knut Haukeli, he went to try to make contact.
We didn't expect to meet them there, so we were very surprised to suddenly met our friends. And when we saw them, we knew them all. They were friends from the training in Scotland. And
We hadn't seen other people for weeks, months, and now we are there, chatting, talking, laughing. It was a meeting I would never forget.
Finally, the two teams met up here at Svensbu for a feast. For gunnerside, fresh reindeer meat. For grouse, treats brought from the UK.
Yeah, the chocolate and things we hadn't tested for months. And we had reindeer stomach to give them. They didn't like it, so they didn't eat it. But we had meat, plenty of meat for them. We had a good meal that first night.
And of course they were very happy to have a feeling that now things are going to happen. So, no, it was a very, very happy meeting. And the next day we started work with paper and pencil and factory and operation in front of us.
On the eve of the operation, the 10 men relocated to this hut just a few miles from the factory. Between them and the target, there was a deep gorge spanned only by a narrow bridge. It was the obvious way in, but it was fortified, and trying to storm it could have spelled disaster.
Klaus Hellberg had lived here all his life, so he was a natural choice to do the recce and see whether this way in was practical.
I did not want to cross the bridge. There were German guards there with machine gun. Most of us thought it was too risky.
So Klaus started to think the unthinkable, a crossing place further down the gorge. It was completely unguarded, as the Germans never considered it to be a feasible way in.
I went down here in the middle of the day and tried to find a place where we could get down. It is very steep down here, and then cross the river and then up on the other side. And I did find quite a good place to get down. No difficulty at all. But this was in daytime, it was light. We had to do it in the darkness.
So after 4 months to push survival skills to the limit, it all came down to this: 10 men against the atomic bomb. The night of the 27th of February 1943 would decide whether or not the men hiding inside this hut would halt Hitler's race to the bomb and give the Allies the crucial advantage.
It takes some time to get used to the idea that this is probably the last thing you do. But that's the difference, I think, to some extent, between people in the free world. I think of Britain and America. You were never occupied. We knew what occupation was, and we fought against it, and we fought against it willingly. And so we moved towards Wehrmacht.
Next, on the real Heroes of Telemark, we relive the incredible raid on the factory and tell of the saboteurs' amazing escapes to freedom.
I was hit by a hand grenade, but because he was just behind me and I ran so fast, so I was away. And then it exploded.
And as the Nazis rebuild the factory, a desperate new plan is hatched to end Hitler's quest for the atomic bomb.
Großartige Sabotageleistung.
The whole operation runs over a period of 2 years. And at every turn, the Germans are blighted by some of the greatest secret agents and special force members of special forces of the Second World War.